Hi. Well, when we ended our class last time, we had been looking at the king and um, and the invitation of the shepherd to return back to him. We talked about the call and the fact that unrequited love can be such a sad thing. We talked about how, as Christ calls us, we must react and we must go with Him. And this young woman is struggling with with the fact that she's captive in a world. Of course, our analogy is that in the world, and that while her body is there, her her soul and her mind and her love is someplace else. It resides with a shepherd who is asking her to return the love that he has for her. And so she is in a hard place. But as we begin our text today, I believe that what she says is, yes, I'm in a hard place, but I've been in a hard place before. I've dealt with this sort of thing in the past. This is not the first time I've had to overcome obstacles when it comes to the one that I love. Our text today begins with perhaps really one of the hardest verses to understand in the text of Song of Solomon. I attribute this to her brothers, that it is them speaking. It is her remembering the brothers speaking. She seems to talk about things that she's faced in the past concerning her beloved. Catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. And then it seems to me that she speaks and she says, my beloved is mine and I am his. He feeds his flocks among the lilies. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee away, turn, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag upon the mountains of Bethar. So let's look at these few verses, which tend to be a little bit more challenging for us. But, like I said, it's almost as if she says, you think this is a hindrance. You think this is an obstacle. You think this palace and this temptation is an obstacle. I have seen more. And so really, as we think about this as an analogy for us, and an allegory of us with Christ, we face many obstacles in our lives, and the older we get and the more obstacles we have faced in the past, the easier it is for us to say, listen, I've faced things that are harder than this. My faith has overcome more than just this. And I think that's the sentiments here. I have on the screen, I am thine, O Lord. I've heard that voice, and it told thy love to me, but I long to rise in the arms of faith and be closer drawn to thee. And so these are the sentiments we sing and we express ourselves. That while the earth and the world can present us with obstacles, we are constantly drawing ourselves closer to the Lord so that he draws closer to us. So let's look at these verses as we begin our study here. Like I said, I think she talks about some things that she's previously overcome, that obstacles like a protective family, her brothers, um, her culture, the accepted culture of the day. So the company in which she found herself was not conducive to keeping alive this vital, vibrant love of this absent shepherd. There was no question about that. And she expresses that. There are a lot of things that are not easy for us to overcome as we draw closer to the Lord. And she talks about how, on the contrary, really, many things have been done deliberately to keep her from him. And that can be true in our lives as well. And she talks about how even with that, she is consumed with the idea of being with the one she loves, that is where she goes. And so, as if the palace is a problem, she says, I've had a past problem and I've mastered these problems. She talks about it seems to me that her brothers, I don't know that they didn't care for the shepherd. I don't know that they didn't like him. We never have any indication of that. But there's no question that at some point, this young woman has gotten to know the shepherd. And it's likely that she was a shepherdess and that they were able to meet and they had freedom to talk and to get to know each other as they cared for their sheep. And it seems that this verse is talking about how when these brothers of hers who seem to be older, there seems to be no father in the picture, we've talked about that, see that she's giving her heart away to the shepherd and being so young that they take her away from the flock and the circumstances that give her comparative ease to communicate with him on a daily basis, and they place her in the vineyard instead. We certainly know that that's where she is when the palace guards pick her up. And so it seems to me that that's what she's talking about. And she said, I've been taken away from me before. And my brothers have tried to make it harder for me because I was young. And but her point is, but I've never lost my love for him. I've always remembered the love that I have for him. And so the brother's goal seems to be quite easy. Quite simple. To make it as difficult as possible for her to have any contact with him, being that it seems inappropriate to them at that time, to not allow this fox to ruin the vine of such a tender fruit. There would be ways that could be, or things that could be inappropriate were they to continue on with that communication and that contact that they had. And they may, like I said, they may not have even known him. It may not be that they didn't like him. It was just not a good thing for their sister at the time. And then she says, my beloved's mine, I'm his. So she turns and says, they took me away from him, but he's mine and I'm his. And he feeds his flocks among the lilies until the day breaks and the shadow flee away. Turn, my beloved, be like a gazelle, a young stag upon the mountains of Bethar. So far from being discouraged by the opinion and the attitude of her family, and especially her brothers, she expresses her utter devotion to the shepherd. And so it didn't deter her. She says, listen, you, Solomon, you and all these comforts and everything that you're offering me are nothing in comparison to what my brothers tried to do to distract me in the past and to separate me in the past. And then she says, this is how I feel about him. And she declares how she feels about him. He's mine, I'm his, that's it. And surely we understand these analogies with Christ, that the world may look at us and say, you're crazy. This just doesn't even seem logical. It doesn't seem reasonable. It doesn't seem right. And we say, well, but it's the way that it is. I love him more than anything. He loves me more than anything. And so, or more than you can understand. So nobody was going to come between her soul and the one she loved. It's total devotion to the shepherd, just as our total devotion that we feel towards God and Jesus. She passionately longs for him. This is love, not lust. This is not lust that she's talking about. She's not talking about anything inappropriate. It was logical, determined, steadfast love that she has for him. And then she says, turn, my beloved, be like a gazelle or a young stag among the mountains of Bethar. The mountains of Bethar are rendered in some translations as the mountains of separation, which kind of gives us a better idea that the new obstacles are no harder to overcome than the ones in the past, that there have been mountains of separation from before. The palace is no greater than these mountains of separation. And surely as we go through our lives, we understand this. Like I said, we do grow in our ability to tell our world that temptations and trials and tribulations we're having now are nothing in comparison to some things we've done in the past, that my Lord is not overcome by obstacles. He doesn't stop because of obstacles. He's still able to flood me with the comforts that he provides. He has no mountains of separation that he and I together cannot overcome. And so that seems to be what the sentiment is here. And we get this. We understand that the discussion here. And now we are turned, let's see, let me make sure I've got this. Protective family, her distance and circumstances, pressures from the palace never deterred her determination, her longing, her devotion. There will be no obstacles too great. And then she says, let me tell you a little story. Let me tell you about a dream I've had. And she goes then, as we start chapter 3, into a text that I love. She actually tells 2 dreams that really turn into nightmares, but this is the first of them. So she says, by night, so she said, listen, the palace is nothing in comparison to some of the obstacles. There's no mountains of separation that can deter me from this devotion that I have. And then she says, I'm going to tell you about a dream I've had. By night, on my bed, I sought the one I love. I sought him, but I did not find him. I will rise now, I said, and I will go out into the city and the streets and in the squares. I will seek the one I love. I sought him, but I did not find him. The watchmen who go about the city found me. I said, have you seen the one I love? All right, so this is the beginning of a dream that is so real to her. In fact, I think she's still talking to the women in Solomon's court, and she tells first about this frantic search that she has for him, that she had this dream that was so real that she woke up and she thought he was there. And we've all experienced this, right? We all understand this. She had dreamed of her beloved, and it was so real that when she woke up, she put her hand out to touch him, but he wasn't there. And she was certain that he would be there, but he wasn't. And so she says, in her dream, she sought her shepherd in all the realms where your soul can wander while your body recuperates and sleeps. So of course it can do the unimaginable, and it can do things that are dangerous and that things that don't make sense. But she goes out, she opens her eyes, she sees that he's not there, but she's gone out, and she's in the blackness of light. She's in the blackness of the night. Whether or not, there's a lot of different thoughts on this, whether or not she's sleepwalking or whether or not she's still dreaming, she has done something very dangerous. In other words, she gets up, she has this frantic feeling that he's gone. She doesn't know where he is, and she does the only thing that seems logical and reasonable to her in this state of being without him, and that is she will pursue this beloved. She goes out and she pursues him. Her dream memories were still so vivid, and she's so involved in this dream. And so then, and as she makes this kind of silly decision to go out into the city streets, into the squares, and seek the one she loves. So you think about this, what she does. So she has this frantic, sick feeling when she realizes that he's not there, and that perhaps this was a dream. And whether or not she's still in a dream or not, we don't know. But just think about this. So what she does is she gets out of the bed, she dresses herself, she slips out into the night, and she begins to tramp the dark streets and lanes of this eastern city. Very dangerous. It did not matter what it took. She was going to find the one she loved, the beloved. She explores the highways and the byways alone, by night, driven by this hunger of her heart for her shepherd. And so, of course, it's a very foolish thing to do, as dreams go. But really, the thought is, I would go to any lengths. I would endanger my life. In fact, if somebody threatened my life, I would let them take my life in order that I would never be separated from this beloved of mine. Surely we understand, and I'll continue to say, the analogies of us with Christ, that nothing is worth it, that even our lives and the loss of our lives is nothing in comparison to how much we love our Savior. And so she goes out, and she couldn't find him. And I think about this. And this is just the way dreams are, but she's in a city street looking for a shepherd in the night. So you just think about all of this. This is a dream. We've all had them. How could she ever expect to find this shepherd who spends his days out in the fields and his evenings either with the sheep or somewhere out, certainly in a rural area, not in an urban area. But her loneliness and longing and love drives her to this course of action that was not merely unwise, but dangerous. And it's called intensity of love and true hunger. It's what we do when we really, really, really desire something. Like I've said, we've talked about this. There's no extent to which we will not go for someone we love. And that's why we need to remember that this is really, I believe this is about what we should feel towards Jesus and towards God, and that there's nothing we wouldn't give to, if we lost our communication with him, if we lost his relationship with him, what would we not give up to get back to his fold? And that's what this is really talking about. So even in her search, she doesn't forget to profess her love. And she makes the assumption that everybody understands who he is. She says, have you seen the one I love? To these watchmen who have no idea whatsoever who she is or what she's doing. Not, have you seen the shepherd, the one that's out in the field, 4 miles outside of such and such? It's not that. She just makes the assumption that everybody knows him and everybody should understand who he is. And certainly, surely that is the way we feel sometimes about our Lord, that it is impossible to remind ourselves sometimes that people don't know him. They don't care about him. They don't want to know him. They're not interested in him. He's too simple. He's too passive. And so that is where we see her. And then it said, scarcely had I passed them when I found the one I love, and I held him and I wouldn't let him go until I had brought him into the house of my mother and into the chamber of her who had conceived me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the does of the field, do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. And so now she tells us, she turns. It's a love that's marked by two things here. She sees him first off. And when she found the one she loved, she held him and she wouldn't let him go. And the story does not tell us how or why this has happened or how she found him in the middle of the streets and in this city, this shepherd, but she has. Just when she needs him the most, she finds him and she clings to him and she will not let him go. And when she's, it's almost as if she begins to understand how foolish she looks to the guardsman and how silly it seems to everybody else. And there he is. He's right in front of her, and she clings to him and she will not let him go. And so you think about this. Everybody around her who she's telling the story to, they think that she's talking about this little shepherd out there. And they have no desire to know him. They do not think he would be interesting to them. Isn't that the way we feel sometimes when we're telling others about our Lord? It certainly is. And so, and this reminds me that when it talks about how she clung to him, it reminds me of Mary in the garden. You remember how Mary was in John 19 and 20, when she sees, when she finally realizes who Jesus is, first she asked, tell me where he is and I'll go get him. And so this woman, this little woman from Palestine is going to go and lug this dead body, I don't know, over her shoulder. And so all of that was sort of insanely crazy. And then as soon as she realizes who he is, she clings to him and she won't let him go because Mary didn't know what she'd do without him. And that's the sentiments that are here. That's what love does. That's what true love is. How are we going to live without him? That's what I feel like with my Jesus. What would I do if I had to be without him in this world, in this dark world? And you can find him anywhere. You can find our shepherd on the city streets, in the airports, in the train stations. You can look for him anywhere. You can be anywhere. You can be in your car. You can be in a shopping mall. You can be anywhere. And he is there. And we can cling to him. And so she sees him and she sees him and you picture this scene. First there's this dream with its nightmare qualities, followed by this awakening that he's there. The dream with all its tangible overtones. It left her hungrier than ever for the sound of this beloved's voice and the actual touch of his hand. I mean, she's got it in her head. You know, you ever think about heaven so much that you can almost put yourself there, or you dream about it, and it's so exciting, and you have that flooding feeling of all the anxiety being gone. And this is what she's talking about. I don't see how we can read Song of Solomon and not know that we are to see Christ in this. And so then after that, she wakes up, she feels him, and then she has this search in these darkened streets, and she goes through the world of terror and trials and tribulations, and she finally sees him, her beloved, and she grasps him. No wonder she seizes him and says she will never let him go. And we see her clinging and sobbing and telling of the broken sentences of everything that's happened and how the king has taken her into his world and everything that's happened. And she didn't only seize him, but she wouldn't let him go. And she brought this dear shepherd of hers into the home, into her very own home, into the most intimate places of her heart. She brings him, she allows him to be there with her, that she can express her most intimate thoughts, that she can tell of her most terrifying pains, of her horrors and her stories. She brings him into where her mother can meet him. She shows him to her mother. She tells him about her mother. And she allows her mother to know him, as we do. Because perhaps if her mother knows him, her mother can convince her brothers. Into this world. And so she experiences him in the most intimate ways, but not inappropriately. Look at verse 5. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles and the does of the field, do not stir up or awaken love. This is that same warning that she's given before. Again, they've misunderstood what true love is. They seem to be snickering, applying something that is not right. It's the second time out of 3 that she warns them. This young woman's observation about there being restraints needed, that this is not inappropriate love, that this is not some kind of crazy, that this is not some kind of worldly love, that this defies that reason and that lust and those natural feelings. It is, in fact, about being transformed into something you are not, rather than going with the world. And a new speaker seems to enter here. It's uncertain who. I would say this before we move on, because they're going to distract us. They're going to tell us. But in this warning, Solomon had showed no restraint. He had just offered her riches, jewels, flattery. He had offered her to be queen. Of course, he already had 60 of those, but she would be number 1. He had offered her a banqueting table. She would never be hungry. She would never be without. She would always have the best of everything. But he hadn't offered her that type of security that the shepherd had. It was different. And these women didn't understand. And that's why she would go to the lengths she did to find the one that she loved. You know, you think about what lengths she would go to for Christ. And the picture of Mary Magdalene, as Christ had healed her from all the crazy. And her going to the grave and being willing to drag the dead body, I don't know where, to better prepare it. The love that she had for him. She couldn't imagine being without him. And neither could this young woman. Well, as we know, this is a song. And songs have verses, and songs have thoughts that jump chronologically, that leap over great portions of time. But we are brought back to the real world, so to speak, of Solomon. She's wandered off again. She's told the women, and now her mind is, she tells of this dream that she had and the great lengths that she'll go to find the one she loves, and that she cannot be separated from him, and that she doesn't know what she's going to do without him. And they say, oh, who is coming out of the wilderness like pillars of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the merchant's favorite powers? So it's almost as if they say, no offense, really no offense at all, but look at this. Now, it's almost as if we've got a reporter, a newspaper reporter here, who's flashing the news for us. I don't know whether the young woman is observing a parade. More than likely she did. More than likely the women of the palace would have said, did you not see him today? Did you not see him as he entered the city today? You're still talking about a dream that you're having about the shepherd. And have you not seen what happened today? If you've ever seen these huge military parades and these royal parades in different countries, you will understand this. And so they say, no offense, but have you seen this? Who is this coming out of the wilderness? So Solomon appears back on the scene, coming to Jerusalem. The streets of the city are lined with the cheering throng, the admirers. It was his triumphant entry that is pictured here. Solomon rode into the city with pomp and power, with fanfare and flourish, with a display of splendor and worldly glory. I mean, they are going to bring this young woman into the understanding of what a world can offer, if it's the last thing they do. So they again remind her, this is not the gazelle lurking behind the windows. This is him coming into town in a great fashion, pomp and fanfare and flourish. And so what we observe in the scene is the world welcoming its own and praising Solomon for the things that the world most admires. This is why Israel wanted a king. This parade sums up why Israel wanted a king. If you ever go to England and you see the pomp and the circumstance and all the British people lined up to watch, it fills them with the knowledge, with the understanding that they have something wonderful in this display that the world gives. And so it's a scene of of power and pomp and circumstance and riches. And who wouldn't want it? And he is offering her that, right? So we find no word here about the shepherd. He's gone. They're not going to talk about him. They're going to talk about the king. No thought of the Shulamite, just the scene of the king and the glory, and his glory. Verse 6 appeals to all of our senses, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the merchant's fragrant powers, pillars of smoke. We use all of our senses, our ears, our eyes, smell, our taste, everything's here. It's an outward show of an inward sham, isn't it? This is what we're seeing. The Shulamite was a prisoner. The shepherd was unknown, and Solomon strutted splendidly on his way. It's an epitome of worldly pomp and pride. What a scene. The crowds were cheering as the king was just as high as a kite. Exactly why they had insisted God give them one. People are so silly. God had promised them peace and blessings if they would dwell in the land, observing his law with the judges among them. But they couldn't do that. It didn't look enough like the world. Behold, it says in verse 7, behold, and this world and its pomps, the sophistication, the spectacular displays, it's sensual, it's seductive, all of the things the world offers, by the way. Behold, it is Solomon's couch with 60 valiant men around, of the valiant of Israel. They hold swords, being expert in war, every man, and his own sword on his thigh, because of the fear of the night. Behold, his bed, which is Solomon's, is the first thing that impresses us. Solomon is coming into the city with style. He enters the gates with ease, carried in this sedan on these brawny shoulders of strength of these slaves. There's nothing lowly about this entrance that he makes. Nothing lowly at all. It is a powerful display. He enters with power. How could she not be impressed? I mean, that's what they're saying. Have you seen this stuff? I mean, this is not what humility is made of. This is quite impressive. And most of the women in that palace, in fact, my guess is all of them except this woman who has a song written about her because he cannot figure her out, is impressed with this. What's the deal with this girl? What's the deal with this girl? The world is always impressed by the show of strength. It's not impressed with lowly humility like a shepherd. Weakness is despised, but strength it respects. The world's captured by the spirit of might is right and the survival of the fittest. It's one of the characteristics that most puzzled those on the hill in Galilee as our new king and the Messiah offers the citizenship of the kingdom to those who are poor in spirit and those who are meek and those who hunger and thirst. Think about Isaiah's description of the lamb who would be led to the slaughter without saying a word. This was not the description in this parade of this Solomon. First, we're told there were warriors. Oh my goodness. There were warriors. They come in. 60 valiant men, most impressive. Military parades in India and Russia and England that I have seen. I mean, you look at these pictures of these military parades. That's what's being discussed here. The crowds could look with admiring eyes at the king's guardsmen. What a brave sight they were, tramping in step to the beat of the drum. They talk about the weapons. This is not the staff of a shepherd, is it? They enter in style. They all have their own weapons, these warriors with their weapons. Everybody has their own. They don't have to rely on each other. These were trained troops that kept pace with Solomon's entourage, hardened by war. Perhaps these were veterans either. Look at them. This was power that this young woman was being offered, all centered on a parade of marching men armed to the teeth and ready for war. These were not forces that would be bossed around by other people, like a shepherd, for instance. The people were impressed with Solomon as he manifested all of the pomp and the power. And now there's another aspect that is considered. It's not enough just to see the power. Look at the riches of the wood of Lebanon. Solomon the king made himself a palanquin. He made its pillars of silver and supports of gold, its seat of purple, its interior paved with love by the daughters of Jerusalem. The purchasing power of money is what's being discussed here. There can be no question about whether or not Solomon had the riches of the world in abundance. So much so that in 1 Kings 10, even the writer of the Second Chronicle, writing up the story of Solomon's time, seems to have been dazzled and awed by the wealth of a king. I'm going to read that passage. 1 Kings 10, verses 14 through 21. Let me get there here. In 1 Kings 10, we're told of his riches. The weight of the gold that came to Solomon yearly was 666,000 talents, 666 talents of gold. Besides that, from the traveling merchants and from the income of the trailer and from the kings of Arabia and the governors of the country. And King Solomon made 200-yard shields of hammered gold. 600 shekels of gold went into each shield. He also made 300 shields of hammered gold. 3 mains of gold went into each shield. Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory, overlaid it with pure gold. The throne had 6 steps, and the top of the throne was round at the back. and there were armrests on either side of the place to the seats, and 2 lions stood beside the armrest. It goes on in verse 21. All of King Solomon's drinking vessels were gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Not one was silver, for this was accounted as nothing in the days of Solomon. For the king had merchant ships at sea and the fleet in Haran. Once every 3 years, the merchant ships came bringing gold and silver and ivory and apes and monkeys, so that Solomon surpassed all the kings of the earth, all of the riches and the wisdom. It is just incredible to read about Solomon. And that is what's now being defined as we see it in the form of a parade. But really, it's the parade that the world puts before us every day. The things that we spend time and energy to strive for, the things that were being offered to this young woman are the things that we set aside Christ for. And we have to remember this. We have to remember this. And so we look at Solomon's wealth. And the writers of the Chronicles and the Kings tell us that Solomon's income in gold and cold cash amounted to 666 talents, and that the temple was overlaid with 600 talents, 25 tons of gold, millions of dollars, even today. Why waste your time on silver when you can have gold? I mean, that's what it says. This was a rich man. Vanity of vanities, he later writes. I mean, he talks of his exploration in Ecclesiastes is about this. He talks about, I wrote it. I mean, I had everything. I didn't have enough entertainers, so I got more entertainers. I had power where the kings were coming and bowing down to me. I had riches. And I would explore more and more and more. And that's what's being demonstrated before this young woman in the form of a parade. In a sense, it's being paraded before her. Extravagance is mentioned in verse 10. 1,000 families in Jerusalem may be starving, but not him, and not his queens, and not his concubines, and not his household. They were not. After all, he is the king, and the people adored him. What a scene. What a scene. And what this scene must have done to this young woman as she's being called to admire this and to look at this and to consider this as her future, to make sure she understands the total picture of everything she's giving up just for a shepherd. That is who you are. We need to make sure we've given it up and that we're not lagging along behind that parade. All of this. And I will tell you, here comes perhaps one of the hardest, or if not the hardest. Go forth, O daughters of Zion, and see King Solomon with a crown, with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, the day of gladness of his heart. I'm going to tell you what, this is popularity. And this may be the very hardest thing for her to say no to, is the popularity of this man. Everybody loved him. Everybody loved him. Look at the shallow crowd. The expression daughters of Zion occurs only here and in 2 passages in Isaiah. And on all of the occasions, all of them, it describes the daughters of Zion as with contempt, as being haughty. Isaiah 3 in verses 16, 17, moreover, the Lord says, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with outstretched necks and wanton eyes, walking and menacing as they go, making a jingling on their feet. Therefore, the Lord will strike with a scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will uncover their secret paths. Isaiah 4:4, when the Lord was washed away the filth of the daughter of Zion's and purged the blood of Jerusalem from her midst by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. These are the most brazen, immodest, flaunting, degenerated state of women. And they're all just enamored with him. They would leave everything for all the glories of the world. Anything of value was no longer seen. Why would we think this phrase was used as any differently than Isaiah used it? Surely Solomon understood. It's used consistently to refer to women who have doubtless morals, the kinds of women who would throw themselves at Solomon, and the worldly shallow crown which he could provide. Who was this man who was seeking this young woman? What are we told about him as we explore this text? Do you know, young women, and all of us today must understand that these were glorious offers. We need to make no doubt about that. We need to not look at this and say, oh my goodness, because I will tell you, most of us would take these offers. She just didn't have a heart that was inclined that way. And it fascinated him. He had never met anybody like her. And that's why he wrote a song of songs about her. You know, I think about some of the silliness that our world gets wrapped up in. Some of the things that we will sacrifice our shepherd for. You know, those that don't know our shepherd, they look at our lives of service in these wonderful congregations in this kingdom as not being sophisticated. Our shepherd does not provide material riches. He doesn't promise honor. In fact, the opposite of that. I mean, you think about what the marriage of a king does, it automatically provides honor. I don't care how sickening you are. You're provided honor even if you're not likable, if you marry a king. But our marriage to our king doesn't offer those types of honors. Our shepherd is not the popular opinion of the day. His way does not provide guaranteed ease. In fact, you will find yourself serving, wearing yourself out. And to make it even harder, he doesn't come parading down our street. We have to search for him. We must awake to understand how important it is to find him. We have to cling to him and not let him go. We have to draw ourselves near to him. We must not be afraid to be ridiculed or to be misunderstood. We must have faith that mountains will not separate us. Our shepherd is not overcome by such, and we must believe that. We must believe that he hears us and that we can hear him. And then we must watch the parade and not be swayed from the understanding that there is something better.